this project, you'll want to prime your canvas with an acrylic gesso or a paint primer. We're going to prepare the edges by adding a medium adhesive to these edges so that we could apply the gold foil. This is what I typically use. If you want to know the brand, it's listed in the description below. Once the glue has set for 20 minutes, you'll want to go ahead and apply your gold leaf to the perimeter of your canvas. And this is what your edges should look like once you've cleaned them up. Next, we're going to protect the edges by applying a metal leaf sealer. Once your edges have dried, it's now time to choose what crystal you're going to feature on this art piece. I had a tough time deciding between what crystal I was going to use for this art piece, so I decided to pull out my clear quartz crystals, and to the right here I pulled out my apophyllite clusters. So as you can see, eventually I was leaning toward the apophyllite, so I chose that. So when choosing a crystal, you want to choose a piece that's substantial enough to make a statement, but not so tall where it protrudes so high up from the art piece. So I feel like this cluster here will do the trick. I feel it's got good structure to it. You can see the crystals, they're all intact, and it's large enough to make that statement that I want. Typically, I would surround my crystal cluster in what I call the quartz druzy effect. Now, to achieve that effect, I do have a course on that, and I'll attach it in the description below. But for this piece, I'm going to be using crushed apophyllite. This is normally pretty hard to get here. I get this from India, but if you want to find something very similar, you can also look up crushed quartz, and you'll get something pretty similar to this. At this point, I'm determining where I want to place my cluster, and I do like the idea of placing it off center here toward the left and the crystal pointing up. I also came across this apophyllite tip, and I thought it would look really nice in this piece. After you determined where you want to place your cluster, you're going to go ahead and hot glue that on. And here I'm using my trusty Ryobi hot glue gun, which I absolutely love. I tried to adjust this piece, but man, that glue just hardened really quickly. Make sure you apply a tight seal on the base of that crystal just to set it in place, and then we're going to go ahead and apply some resin to that, or around that I should say. If you're going to go with glass chips, you're going to go ahead and add your glass chips to your mixing cup, or if you're going to do the quartz druzy effect, same thing. Here I'm applying the crushed apophyllite to the mixing cup and then applying resin right over. This right here is the secret to getting the most beautiful shimmery crystals without looking like it's been overdone in glitter. I'll attach a link in the description. This is my favorite pigment to apply this, and I apply it with a dry brush right over the crystals. This is what it should look like once it's fully dry. Before we start pouring, we want to make sure that the piece is elevated to prevent your piece from sticking to the surface. I mixed my resin with a white pigment along with a mahogany pigment that I drizzled in here just so that it's not stark white. I'm going for a marble-like effect for this piece. So once I've gotten the base to where I'm happy with it, I'm gonna go in here while the resin is still wet and draw my veins. You can use any thin piece of wood to achieve this. I tried a toothpick and a toothpick is way too thin, but I feel like when I'm making these veins, this little tool that I have here works great. Again, I'll attach a link in the description below. In this step, I'm just going around the perimeter of the crystals with a gold pigment. Some people are happy with this look. So if you're happy with the gold resin pigment around the crystals, you can stop here. But I want to add a thicker border, so I'm gonna go ahead and apply hot glue around the perimeter of these crystals. Once the hot glue has set up, I'm going to go in here and apply the adhesive glue to the hot glue. After allowing the glue to get tacky, you can go ahead and apply your gold foil. As a side note, this is my favorite foil to use. As you could tell, it's so brilliant. There's no other foil that I've used that's as shiny as this one. So if you want to know where I got it, make sure to check the description. As most of you may know, removing foil could be a real pain. So what I like to do is use a really stiff brush to remove the excess foil. And when you're brushing, make sure you brush away from the crystals and not toward them. So this is how the dried, and I absolutely hate it. I feel it's too stark and it lacks depth. So what I want to do is apply another layer, but what I'm doing is I'm making this layer opaque. So I'm applying a very small amount of pigment. This way I don't wash out my base. I want those veins to still come through. I'm making sure to spread this resin all over the entire piece. While your second layer of resin is still wet, we're going to go ahead and spray that wet layer with some alcohol ink. However, before doing that, let's protect these crystals. Here I'm using a plastic wrap. You can use that, aluminum foil, or any other protective finish to avoid getting alcohol ink on these crystals. Here I added alcohol ink in the color chocolate to some alcohol in my spray bottle. I gave that a good mix and started spraying over that second layer of resin. You should notice some bubbles or separation forming on the top here. After spraying it with the chocolate ink, I'm now going to spray it with just a plain clear alcohol just to get more of that white coming through. And this is the effect that I'm getting, which I feel is more marble-like. I'm going over this section here with some more alcohol because I want to open up the white. I feel like the chocolate is pretty, but I want a little bit more white coming through. This is how the resin turned out after it dried, and I have to say I'm pretty happy with it. I feel like the second layer added more depth. I can still see my veins coming through, and it still has that organic feel to it. I do love the depth, and I do like that it's warmer. What do you think? I hope you guys like it. And if you want to see more videos like this, don't forget to subscribe.